welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. I'm Christine, and today I'm talking to Tabitha from Oregon, USA. She's been homeschooling for 7 years and is still in the thick of it. And that's long enough to know what you're doing. We talk about what curriculum she and her husband looked for and why. What is important to teach outside of books, and how long-term homeschoolers can help the newer ones. And a wee snippet on how educational knitting is, which I am totally on board with. Tabitha and I met on a knitting chat group, hence our common interests of homeschooling and the noble craft of knitting. Well, thank you, Tabitha, for coming on and agreeing to be interviewed. I'm looking forward to it. So first things first, tell me what's on your needles.
It's the Velour blanket by Gingy Knits. It's a circular blanket pattern. I'm knitting it in fingering weight, old stash, but you can do it in any weight and make it any size. It's real easy knit.
Cool. My favorite knit. I must pop over and have a look. Oh, well, I've got socks, and I may swap over to boring squares if I have to look down too much. I'll see how I go.
I am working on, Paisley we're not Catholic, but we practice First Communion like the Catholics do. And so I'm knitting her a First Communion dress to hopefully be done in time for Easter, but that's lace and I have to pay attention. So I was like, yeah, I can't do that while I'm doing this.
Oh, no. Well, that's part of introducing who you are. Why don't you carry on with that and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So my name's Tabitha. I live in Oregon on the coast. I can see water from my house in a very small town. I have 3 kids. I met my husband on a blind date in high school, and we've been together ever since. I'm a homemaker, and yeah, that's about it. I'm Lutheran.
Oh, that's a great start. So we're on the sea coast as well. I can see the sea from where we are into the Hauraki Gulf in the Auckland Harbour. So it's a beautiful, and it's about a 7-minute walk from our place down to the beach, which we enjoy most days. So, all right, Tabitha, let's get into it. How would you describe your homeschooling curriculum and approach?
So there's a little bit of backstory. We got introduced into homeschooling when my oldest, who is now 14, was in first grade. We did public school, which is government ran school where we live. And she had some learning disabilities and she was getting left behind, but she wasn't bad enough to qualify for extra help in the public school format. Like what we have here is what is called an IEP, which is an individualized education plan. And that's where, depending on what your level of need is how much extra help you get besides a teacher, one teacher and 30 kids. And so first grade, we noticed she was having difficulty. She does have learning disabilities. And when we went to the school district, we asked for more help, which they legally have to do. And we were told no. And they wouldn't help us because she wasn't bad enough. And that basically she was going to fall through the cracks. And we didn't like that. And so we finished out first grade, and then I talked to my husband about homeschooling and he said no. And then so we started second grade with a new teacher. And at the end of second grade, she told us that she needed to be homeschooled, that public school was not an option for her. And she strongly recommended that. So summer of second grade, we started looking into homeschooling, and because I didn't work, so I mean there was really no reason why we couldn't. I was home. It was me and then her sibling, her younger sister, And so my husband said yes, and we started homeschooling her that summer. And I found we're religious, and so that was important to me, was to have a religious style curriculum. And I just went online and started Googling homeschool religious curriculums, and I found a website, and I found the curriculum off of the website. They had hundreds of different kinds, and I researched for weeks, and we found one that we liked, and we did that. So Lord Google helped me find what I was looking. I did talk to other homeschool moms that are in our area, but I just kind of read and did some research and figured out what we liked best. And I found the curriculum that we liked. And so we homeschooled that summer, and we started homeschooling into third grade. And then it didn't mesh well with our personalities, did not mesh at all. And it was terrible. And so we enrolled her into private school in third grade. And she's been, depending on our finances and our budget, she's either been private schooled or homeschooled since then. And she's now 14. She's a freshman in high school, and she's doing kind of a hybrid of online private schooling and her and I doing work together. So, and I homeschool my youngest, and my middle is in a private school. So I'm not your typical homeschooler.
I'm not sure that there is a typical one. There's such a variety, isn't there, amongst it, which is one of the joys of it, is that you can accommodate things to suit your needs.
Yeah.
So that pretty much says why you chose what you did, because to have a faith-based curriculum was important to you. Do you still use that with your youngest?
I do. I don't use that. So we were using it's a mix between, this curriculum is Horizons and Abeka, and that works really well for girls. I've done it with my middle child off and on, depending on where her needs were and where we were at financially. If we can't afford private school, because we have really, really good Lutheran private school. In fact, we go to the church that the private school is based out of, but we've always based our kids going there if we could afford it. And so there's been times where we haven't been able to afford it. And so we pulled them out and homeschooled until we've had the funds to do it, or things changed. So my Paisley, my middle child, and my oldest child, they do really well on it's schooling, but at home. I mean, it's pretty classical. You do your book work, you do this, you do that. And that did not work well for my youngest, who is a boy. So I've tried to do the curriculum with him, but he learned so differently compared to my girls. So we've done a more unschooling approach with him than using a curriculum. We've tried it. He'll do maybe one or two things out of it, and then he's like, no, we're done. We're going to go do something else now, which is fine, because that's really more age appropriate for him than sitting down and doing book work anyways.
It often is for boys.
Yeah.
Yeah. No surprises there. So when you were looking for, you said that that you spent a lot of time researching the curriculum. So what were the important things for you and your husband when you were trying to decide which one to use?
Ones that we agreed with biblically. There are a lot of Christians, we're Lutheran, and a lot of Christian homeschool curriculum doesn't line up with what we believe theology wise. There's a lot of things, a lot of Christian groups like Baptist, non-denominational, that we don't believe the same that they do. There's things like, one of the biggest things is that us Lutherans, Catholics and Orthodox, I believe, we don't believe in a rapture, and that's a pretty big theology difference compared to other groups of Christians. And so it was really important to us to find something that wasn't going to go against our beliefs, because It just creates confusion for the kids to not, our church says this, but my homeschool, my workbooks say this. And so we wanted to avoid that completely. It was really hard because the other Christian groups kind of have the monopoly on curriculum as far as what they put out there. And so it was really hard. We had to take out the religious part of the curriculum, like Abeka and BJU Press. They're kind of big names in the Christian homeschool curriculum world, and we would not do their Bible books, but we knew that their math books or their history books or their English books were fine. They weren't going to teach anything we didn't agree with, but we wouldn't do their religious studies. We would try and find a Lutheran or a Catholic source that would align more with our beliefs. We are real big on baptism, and that's where we baptize, preferably we baptize babies as soon as they're born. That's part of our faith. And a lot of other Christians don't believe that. They believe in believer's baptism, where you once you turn 8, it's what they say, the age of accountability, and then you get baptized. And we don't believe that. And so we were finding a lot of curriculum, religious studies would push that. So that was probably the number one, was that it matched up with what we believe. And number 2 was cost, because although homeschooling can be frugal and affordable, it can get expensive real quick. So I know people that have spent thousands on homeschool curriculum, and I'm just like, that baffles my mind.
Yeah, it can be. I think if you want to buy a complete curriculum, it absolutely can be quite costly.
Yeah.
But if that's what the family needs in order to get your homeschooling done, yeah. Well, looking back from when you started, so like how many years ago was that? So your eldest is, you said 14 or 15, and you started her in was it 3rd grade?
Well, she was 7 when we started.
Okay. All right. So that was about 7 years ago or so. Is there anything you wished you would have known back then when you started to do your research, before you started homeschooling?
If I could redo it, I probably would have never enrolled her in public school and just avoided all that. But I think my homeschooling journey has been a lot of trial by fire, and I would need to have done what I did back then to get to the same results. So I probably wouldn't, except for we wouldn't have even tried public school. We would have just avoided that completely.
Right. Yeah. Hindsight's always pretty clear, isn't it? But at the time, it's not so much. Do you have, Tabitha, any practical tips that you could pass on to especially new homeschoolers starting out, because there's so much to juggle, isn't there, as you get used to a new way to do your day? Any practical tips for us, please?
Don't make public school into homeschool. Don't turn your homeschooling day into what a public school day or even a private school day would look like. Your homeschooling environment is not a brick and mortar school or even an online school, and don't try to force it to be. It's okay if they don't sit at the table or if they don't have a dedicated desk. It's okay if you don't do 7 subjects a day for 40 minutes at a time. It's okay.
I would say amen to that. In my early years, I've just had a thought actually, when our eldest 2 were at a private Christian school, I would help out in there because we had a kind of I donate time, they donate a subsidy on the fees. The interesting thing was that school often tried to emulate a home environment for them to learn in, so that, for instance, they would have little tiny crockery and cutlery to set out on the table, count how many you would need to put out. And then you'd often get, I would observe homeschoolers who were trying to emulate what they thought school was. So you'd get this really weird crossover of both systems trying to copy something else. I just thought of that actually when you were giving that advice.
Yeah,
that's an important one. Do you think as time goes by and you become more confident in your homeschooling environment, you're more inclined to leave that behind?
yeah, because you don't feel pressured to do things the way the school does. But this, where we live, we have very lax homeschool laws, so I can get away with this, to not have a structured schedule. Or, I mean, really, this probably sounds awful, but I don't even have to show proof to the state of what we teach or what we do. It's only every few years you go in for state testing, and it's very easy. And if you don't pass the state testing, nothing really happens. You're just kind of monitored more, but the state doesn't intrude on what I teach in my home. But I know in other states it's very different. You have to show progress reports or grade reports. You have to get your curriculum approved. So it helps being in a very homeschool friendly state, which then it puts a lot of the pressure on the parents to make sure they're actually teaching their kids. So your kids do become educated and they're not just at home doing nothing.
Do you have to apply for an exemption?
All I have to do is I have to, by the time your kids are 6 in Oregon, all you do is contact your local ESD office, which is your educational service district. You don't even notify the school district. You contact this group and you let them know that you plan to homeschool. And then every 3rd grade, 8th grade, and 10th grade, you sign them up for state testing. But if you enrolled your kids, say you homeschool kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and then you send your kids to public school 1 year in between testing years, you don't have to have your kids do the state testing. So there's even ways, which sounds awful, to get out of even getting your kids tested if you put them in private school for a year or you enroll them in public school. So there really is no oversight, which, I mean, it's good and bad, because then they don't see, they don't have a say in what you teach or how you teach. But then you also have parents that don't teach anything at all. And it's a disaster.
Have you actually come across that?
Yes.
Okay.
They follow into, they say that they're unschooling their kids, and there is unschooling in the homeschool world, but you still have to do something.
Have you been, well, keeping that thought in mind then, because unschooling can look a lot like that. However, are you able to look at young adults who have, say, been through that system of approach of education, and that they actually turned out okay? They were able to maybe go to university or college, I think you call it that, or go in and hold their own in business, that they didn't actually turn out, it wasn't the disaster. What have your observations been?
I have seen unschooled homeschoolers where they have turned out okay, but that's only because once the child got to a certain age, generally high school, they said, I'm going to teach myself this because I need to know what's going on. And that's been very rare, to where once they get high school age and they can kind of control, I'm going to teach myself this, or I'm going to do this, then they will teach themselves, and they're usually okay. That's very rare. Generally, what I see where I live and in the state of Oregon is complete chaos. And honestly, it's lazy parenting, parents who don't want to teach, but they don't want their kids to be in a school, because Unfortunately, homeschooling in the state I live has kind of become a cool thing to do, not necessarily what's right for your family or what's right for your child to do. So there's a lot of parents that want to stick it to the government, um, for whatever reason. And this happened a lot with during COVID, is a lot of, or, public school stopped. And so parents, didn't do anything. And while they were not in this public school, nothing was going on. And the parents kept that going. And now they say they're unschooling and they're not doing anything. And so as these kids get older, it's a lot of, my husband and I call it anarchy. It's just complete chaos and they're kind of lost and they don't know what they're going to do.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll have to see how that one plays out, I guess. Thinking about outside of bookwork, things to teach your children. I know you're an avid knitter. I love your wall behind you. And I know you've just come back recently from a family hunting trip. So can you talk to us about how you see the importance of imparting skills to your children as part of your responsibility as parents?
So my husband and I are big on practical skills, sometimes more than bookwork. So our kids know how to hunt, they know how to fish, they know how to bake. My youngest is starting to bake with me. My oldest can bake bread and she can do anything in the kitchen that I can do. She hunts with her dad, she fishes with her dad. She helped butcher our last animal that we processed. So what's nice about homeschooling is the flexibility you have to where if you want to take time off and go away on a hunting trip, you can do that with no repercussions to your schedule. You can just say, this is our time that we're going to do this. And, you can turn it into a school experience and count it. We don't. I mean, we just say we're taking this time off and we're going to go hunting or we're going to go do this. So I've used homeschooling, especially with my middle, a lot of home ec things. We've turned it into a homeschool lesson, but more importantly in our family, it's a life lesson. Because even if they weren't homeschooled, they would need to learn this, especially where we live and how we live. We live in a very small, rural area. So, and we eat meat. Most of our meat is wild meat that we've taken care of ourselves. And that's how we eat so much meat. And part of the dietary principles we follow is because we hunt and kill and we do our own stuff. So
I was going to ask you something about the reasons behind why some of your activities outside of the house are, and I think you've just started to touch on that too, because I mean you can have little Johnny very good at reading or knowing his times tables really well, but I was hoping that you would move into that, wanting to teach them how to build character, how to enhance their skill level. Is there anything else you want to add on into those thoughts?
My husband, it's really important that you're united with your spouse on what you want to teach your kids, and more so than curriculum or anything like that, because for us, it's more important for our kids to know how to do things, to have a good work ethic, than it is for them to be able, I mean, reading's important, writing's important, math is important, your basic life skills are important, but it's more important for us that our kids know how to do practical things, than if they can do an amazing math problem at 10 or, so we're just not your usual homeschool people. I would rather my oldest daughter knows how to change a tire than if she's read like a book that I wanted her to read, for her curriculum, for her homeschool day. I would yes, she does read, she reads on her own, and the same with Paisley. But for us, it's more important that they have skills than doing necessarily the book work.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that character building stuff that you've alluded to too, like I mean, how to tell right from wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't particularly turn out to be a religious person who's homeschooling your children, there has to be a way to be able to discern morality.
Yeah.
That's something that concerns me. Okay. Given that you're still doing your homeschooling and you're, I don't know, a few years in, 6, 7 years, is there anything that veteran homeschoolers who have been homeschooling for a long time can help you with, you specifically, and also homeschool families who are pretty new at it? What do you actually need as newbies?
To be allowed to quit if it's something that your family needs, to be okay. One thing that when we ran into trouble and we said, okay, we need to try something new, when I've reached out to people who've done it, that's all they've done. And they said, no, you can't, you must stay the course. And then I've had other people say, no, it's okay to find something else. So I think that's the most important thing. And people forget is to be flexible, and that what your homeschool year or month may look like last month is not what it's going to be the next month, and that it's okay. It's okay if you need to stop and change and do something different.
All right, that's a good, helpful hint for those of us who have walked the path for a long time, is that there are, well, to see things with a bit of grace, really, and the way we've done something doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way for you. Yeah. Anything else that would be a very practical way for us to remember to help younger ones?
It's okay if they do things differently than what you may have done when you were homeschooling.
Yeah, I'm thinking too of the scripture. I think it was Paul and Timothy saying that the older women would teach the younger women, and I think that there's a bit of a link in there too. Needs thinking about some more. I know you are in a trad wife group. I had to look that up, and then I thought, oh yeah, okay, I get it. You said before that you weren't working in your early years so that you were able to easily start homeschooling. You didn't have to stop paid work outside the home to do something. I've also heard you talk online about it. There's a community out there of trad wives. Do you think this is like a renaissance thing happening? Why are they doing it?
I think that people are tired of the lies that feminism has spread, that women can do and have it all. Before we had kids, well, and even when my oldest was really, really young, I worked full time, and I worked through my pregnancy with her. And it is very hard to keep your house, have a full-time job, and be an active wife and just a person. You cannot do it all. It's very hard. I think if you don't have kids, or you have kids out of the home, you have more time to, if you want to get a job or do something, then that's fine. But a lot of women are burnt out and tired, and they don't want to be in the rat race anymore. They don't want to. And daycare is flippin' expensive. If I were to go back to work now, I couldn't afford to even pay for my youngest, let alone my middle, because she's not young enough to be home by herself. I could not afford to pay for daycare for the two of them. So it's really, I've seen a lot of women come back home and, saying, we don't need all this stuff. We don't need 3 cars. We don't need, a huge house. We don't need all the things that go with trying to keep up. I want to be home, and I just want to be simple. And it's been nice to see that women are realizing that they have this option, that they don't have to work, that they don't have to, if they have somebody who is earning enough to at least pay the basic necessities. then they don't have to be out there.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing for, you know, older women like myself who absolutely have empathy and sympathy and have walked some of that past too, but watching it come like full circle, it's going to be fascinating watching more of this. I can see hints of it's happening. Tabitha, we've got a couple of minutes left on the Zoom thing I've got now booked. Is there anything else we haven't touched on that's on your mind that you would like to drop in?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Teach your kids to knit. That's it. That's a really good one.
Yeah. Why? Why should we teach our kids to knit?
Oh, it helps them with their fine motor skills. It helps them with math. It helps them with creativity. My oldest crochets, and she's designing clothes. She's designing things. She's drawing all these things she wants to make. It helps with her picking out colors. It helps with everything. It's a very practical skill that anybody can do.
I totally agree. I'm totally with you there. Oh, look, Tabitha, thank you so much for generously sharing your experiences and your time and your ideas. I'm sure there is plenty in there to think about.
Yeah.
And I look forward to catching up with you again. Yeah. Bye-bye. See you later, Tabitha.
Thank you.